Vasudevaya. So, just to set the stage, Lord Brahma kind of is on the coming from the lotus stem from Vishnu's belly button, to put it accurately, and he's bewildered. He's alone. He's in this very ferocious ocean. He's scared, and he's depressed. That's what the verses will say that we're going to read. Imagine that you're entirely alone. Now, I personally love humanity. It's people I have trouble with. And so Brahma, like that, he was completely alone in every regard and in a very fearful place. And what do you do when you're completely alone in a very fearful place? Well, when you have anxiety and depression, there are things that can be done. I'll read you something here. And he had anxiety and depression. Then we'll get to the verse in a moment. Prabhupada says in 1866 purport, don't fear, don't hesitate, don't worry. These are, these are Krishna's words. One may be perplexed as how to one give up all kinds of religious forms, sarva dharma prityaja. Such worry is useless, for devotees' fear is Krishnized by surrendering to the Lord. So, the distinction here is between fear and anxiety. So the way we get rid of fear is by surrendering, and our anxiety is that we can't. And that's on here, because Brahma is wondering, what if I've been given, I'm in a fearful position. I don't quite know what I'm doing. I've been given this mission of creation. And if I do this mission of creation, I might become very proud of myself. And then everything I've worked for is vain, because the pride will ruin me. What comes before the fall? Pride. So Brahma is being extremely self-reflective and depressed and anxious. Now, I'm going to put this in a bigger context. We live now in a time of great depression and anxiety. If we go to the University of Florida Counseling Center, we'll find there can be a many-month wait to get in if you're not suicidal or pretending to be suicidal. It's very hard to even get to see a therapist, because so many students have anxiety and depression, way more than prior generations. And how did this happen? It all began in 2010. The generation that was in high school in 2010 had, especially ladies, had a larger quantity of anxiety and depression than prior generations, even during the Depression. What happened in 2010? Yes, and one particular aspect of social media. MySpace, well, Facebook, the like button. That's when it came out. So people's position, especially ladies, were determined by anonymous people pressing a like button. What else happened in 2010? An invention to make this ubiquitous. iPhone. And there's a recent study that, a very well done study by my favorite social psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, in which he examines this in some detail. And in fact, anxiety and depression became rampant for the generation that was born in, let's say, the mid-90s or a little bit later, and then started 2010, things started changing, and it gets worse. There's even a mood to ban social media by the legislature. Obviously, that won't work and it won't happen. There's some concern about it. So in this context here, Lord Brahma is also feeling anxiety and depression, but he's doing it in a transcendental way. Because what does he do? He feels that way. We'll see. So let's begin with verse 14. The verse we'll focus on, I think, is supposed to be 23. So we'll just start reading the English because there's a series of verses to do. So who would like to begin reading verse 14? Then there'll be a context here, you'll find it best.
Let me offer my obeisances unto the Supreme Transcendence, who is eternally distinguished by his internal potency. His indistinguishable impersonal feature is realized by intelligence for self-realization. I offer my obeisances unto him who by his pastimes enjoys the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation.
Okay, next verse.
Let me take shelter of the lotus feet of him whose incarnations, qualities, and activities are mysterious imitations of worldly affairs. One who invokes his transcendental names, even unconsciously, at the time he quits his life, is certainly washed immediately of the sins of many, many births and attains him without fail.
Your Lordship is the prime root, the tree of the planetary systems. This tree has grown first, penetrating the material nature, and three trunks, as me, Shiva, and you, the Almighty, for creation, maintenance, and dissolution. And we three have grown with many branches. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto you, the tree of the cosmic manifestation.
I just want to pause a second and see what is Lord Brahma doing? Well, he's teaching us how to pray. When we have anxiety, depression, what do? Well, we take shelter of Krishna. It's an impetus for us to go deeper. Now, it can be an impetus for us to go in the opposite direction, even suicidal. But that's not what Brahma did. He never thought, I'm going to go drown myself in the causal ocean. I've had enough of this. There's not even a hint he was thinking of that. Rather, he said, I'm bewildered. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. Can't figure out what's going on. But I know the Supreme Lord will hear my prayers, and I'm going to pray. So how does he begin his prayers? First, he's describing the qualities. This is normal interaction. Let's say we have a guest speaker coming to Krishna House. Somebody who hasn't been here, maybe some prominent person. What's Shruti Sargar going to do? He's going to introduce that person and say, oh, this is so-and-so. He wrote these books. He's done this. He's done that. He'll talk about, yeah, exactly. He'll talk about the qualities of the person. That's just normal human interaction. Same thing here. In our prayers, we talk about it. And then when we talk about it, we start to appreciate. So what's going on here in the context is Lord Brahma is beginning his prayers not by asking for something, but by appreciating, by being grateful of who the Lord is. As long as their tendency for foolish work remains powerful, all their plans for struggle existence be cut to pieces. I therefore offer my obeisance to him who acts as eternal time. In other words, Krishna says in the Gita, a famous line, "Time, I am the destroyer." The one that was quoted by who? What famous person, 20th century, quoted that line? Oppenheimer. When he set off the first atomic bomb, Trinity. He knew the Gita fairly well, and he quoted, "Time, I am the destroyer." And Oppenheimer was quite concerned that maybe this will destroy the world. He still may be right. He was very concerned about that. Nobody had ever seen an explosion that big before. So let's go on I'll read this. We're going to go on to verse 18. "Your Lordship, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you, who are indefatigable time and the enjoyer of all sacrifices. Although I am situated in an abode which will continue to exist for a time duration of 2 paradas," it's a long time. "Although I am the leader of all other planets in the universe, and although I've undergone many years of penance for self-realization, still I offer my respects to you." No, it's Brahma. Yeah, I'm a big shot. I got this big position. I'm running all the universe. I'm creating everything. But I'm your humble servant. And why is he saying this? You'll see why. "Oh, my Lord, by your own will, you appear in various species of living entities, among animals lower than human beings, as well as among demigods, to perform your transcendental pastimes. You are not affected by material contamination. You just came to fulfill the obligations of your own principles of religion. And therefore, O Supreme Personality, I offer my obeisances unto you." So here, Lord Brahma is saying, you're very independent. You are not affected by material contamination, but you've come just to establish religious principles. And he's saying, in essence, thank you. "My Lord, you accept the pleasure of sleeping in the water of devastation, where there are violent waves, and you enjoy the pleasure on the bed of snakes, showing the happiness of your sleep to intelligent persons. That time, all the universal planets are stationed with your abdomen." Now, let's look at that verse in relation to modern science. The latest theories on the creation of the universe. Actually, we can't use the word theory. Why can I not use the word theory about the creation of the universe? Latest scientific theories. Why is the word theory the wrong word? We have science students here. Somebody knows this. Excuse me? I'm not hearing you. Yeah. Well, a part of it is that a theory is falsifiable. You can test it. Any theory you can test. I have a theory that if I speak in a monotone, half the class will fall asleep. I can test that theory. And by the way, it works. So there are ways to test, but there's no way to test the theory of creation. So it's technically not a theory. It is an hypothesis that is untestable. But let's look at the modern hypothesis. The modern hypothesis says this: the universe begins, they call it the Big Bang, a singularity. It begins, it expands, then after some time contracts, expands and contracts. A cyclic universe. Each of these cycles are so many billions of years. Now, where have you read something like that? It's exactly what the Bhagavatam says. Lord Vishnu breathes and universes emanate. Breathes in and universes come back in. For Lord Vishnu, that's a moment. For us, it's about 15 billion years or whatever it is. Some more than that, some very large period of time. But for Lord Vishnu, it's a moment. So that's the idea that universes come and go. Then the big question in modern science is this: which comes first, consciousness or matter? Because the material way of looking at it, you have matter, and then matter coalesces from this quantum soup, they call it. You get matter, and then matter eventually evolves into various creatures and human beings, and then consciousness, somehow, where does consciousness fit into this? It's always a mystery. The famous philosopher David Chalmers calls it the hard problem of consciousness. Hard problem in physics, what is consciousness? So the latest theories, though, are kind of interesting for us, because the latest theories realize before there can be matter, there has to be some intelligence. I'll give you an example. There's something called the fine-tuning constants. Does anybody know what that is? Any cosmologists here? Fine-tuning constant. There are certain numbers, like the Planck constant, which some of you have seen as age, a very tiny number. Other numbers that are mathematical. In the mathematical formulas for describing creation, there has to be certain numbers. And if these numbers were off in the 10th decimal place by 1 digit, then we would not be here speaking according to theory. Things don't work. So before there was creation, there had to be numbers. If there are numbers, somebody show me a number. You can't. A number is a concept in the mind. You can say 2 fingers, but it's a concept in the mind. You don't ever walk down the street and just trip over numbers. I guess you can trip over a mailbox that has a number on it, but besides that, so numbers. So before there's creation, there has to be, I'm talking about modern science. The Bhagavatam, of course, definitely says this, but saying that there has to be some intelligence, because you don't get numbers without mind. So mind before matter. Some of the top scientists in the world now, in the last 10 years, it's been a radical change, are now saying that consciousness may come before matter. It's a complete reversal of everything I learned at school in this standard evolutionary model, complete reversal. But in the last 10 years, there's been a huge change. There's a major conference coming on in Tucson, Arizona, the end of April. It's the largest conference in the world on consciousness in science. And all the big shots there, and people like Deepak Chopra and others all go. And we were lucky, we got a poster session a couple of years ago. This year they gave us a 4-hour block for the Bhaktivedanta Institute to present our papers. They're so interested because we're trying to look deeper at what consciousness is, which is clearly not a derivative project of matter. Just like if I have a radio, the radio is just the antenna to collect information that's out there and put it in a form that we can understand it. But so similarly, our brain is like the antenna, but consciousness is beyond that. So that's some of, I digress a little, but that's some of what I wanted to relate some of this to modern science. I'm a BI guy. So the object of my worship, I am born from the house of your lotus stable for the purpose of creating the universe by your mercy. All those planets of the universe were stationed within your transcendental abdomen while you were enjoying sleep. Now your sleep having ended, your eyes are open like blossoming lotuses in the morning. Let the Supreme Lord be merciful toward me. He is the one friend and soul of all living entities, and he maintains all for the ultimate happiness by his 6 transcendental opulences. May be merciful towards me so that I, as before, may be empowered with the introspection to create, for I am also one of the surrendered soul who is dear to the Lord. And because of time, I am just going to read the English here. The Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is always a benefactor of the surrendered souls. His activities are always enacted through his internal potency, Rama, or the goddess of fortune. I pray only to engage in this service in the creation of the material world, and I pray that I may not be materially affected by my works, for thus I may be able to give up all prestige of being the creator. So, how does it apply to all of us? All of us, for example, let's just pick a random person. So we pick a random person. So he has a position of authority. So how does somebody with a position of authority do it? They can be lording it over. I'm the boss, do as I say, not as I do, or whatever. Or they can be the humble servant of everyone. There's a name of this in management. It's servitor leader, the leader as servant. So this is the mood of the Vaishnavas, and this is the mood of Lord Brahma. There's a book written by one devotee, Sri Prahlad, Management Lessons in the Gita. Has anyone seen that book? Anybody ever hear a lot? You don't know what Sri Prahlad is a professor in New York now. Brilliant. We should put that clip on of Sri Prahlad singing Mr. Gorbachev. Well, we'll just digress a little bit. In the 80s, the Soviet Union was prosecuting devotees. They would put them in the mental hospitals. They would put them in the gulag because devotees had secret printing presses and they were printing Gitas in Russian, and the Russian government didn't want it. And a few dozen devotees were actually arrested and tortured. One of them actually died. And at that time, Gorbachev was the head of the Soviet Union, and he was doing detente, trying to make peace with the West. And so a campaign was initiated by a local devotee here, Kirti Raj and Harikesh, initiated a campaign where they went to Soviet embassies around the world and released doves to give attention to the Hare Krishnas who were in prison. And this one 12-year-old boy made a song. And the song became such a hit in Australia that the Prime Minister Hawke of Australia, said, "What's going on here?" and invited the boy's father to meet with him. And the boy's father then met with the Prime Minister Hawke, and Hawke said, "You know, I have a meeting with Gorbachev soon. Tell me what's going on." And he gave him a list of a few dozen Hare Krishnas that were imprisoned. And Prime Minister Hawke brought that to Gorbachev's attention. And Gorbachev said, and Gorbachev was not a bad man. He actually spoke at the University of Florida. I heard him speak. You can tell he wasn't a bad person. Of course, that was way after the Soviet Union collapsed. And Gorbachev said, "I know nothing about this." He was telling the truth. Within 2 weeks, all the Hare Krishnas were released and given visas to visit India. And it was a grand, I don't know, 86, 87, something like that. All these Russian devotees were able to visit Mayapur. You have that thing? Yeah. If you can't find it, don't worry. We found a version by Sri Prahlad. See? Yeah, that's it. Play it. Okay. Well, anyway, we again digress. So let me ask you a question here. So Lord Brahma is the master creator, very powerful, has more heads than you have. I mean, I have 4 eyes, he has 4 heads. So we have Lord Brahma here. So my question is he perfect? Is Lord Brahma perfect? This is an interesting, here it goes. Here. That doesn't make a difference. Yes, he's a professor now. Please let our friends go. It's a song. Okay, that's enough. Huge success. That song freed the Soviet Hare Krishnas. That song alone did it. Sri Prahlad's in New York now. He gives classes regularly at the Bhakti Center. Any of you go to Sadhu Sangha, the big retreat? He's one of the main singers there. Is he the one that did the reggae? He did? Okay. Oh, yeah. He travels with Indradumna Swami quite a bit. Okay. And those who make it to Sadhu Sangha will appreciate this. So the question is Lord Brahma perfect? So who says he's perfect? Okay. Who says he's not perfect? Okay. Why do you say he's not perfect? Yes. It's a conditioned soul. And how do you know that? Yeah. That's a good answer. Yes.
He stole the cowherd boys.
He stole cowherd boys. He had some bad incidences, some other incidences that were fun.
I just mentioned this a week or so ago that I heard a conversation by Prabhupada. I have it indexed on MP3 disc, but instead of putting the date in the place, I put where it was on the MP3. Now MP3s are obsolete. My MP3 player is broken, so I can't find it. But there's a conversation that was very early on where Prabhupada says we'll never be perfect, even in our liberated state. Well, Krishna's the only perfect person. And there was also a statement like that in the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not in Back to Godhead also. There was a lecture by Prabhupada where that was said. I might be able to find that, but I'm not really sure.
Well, well said. So let me ask the harder question. Is Prabhupada perfect? Yeah, this is a hard question. Go on.
Prabhupada was just admitting that. He admitted it in his statement. We'll never be perfect, even in our liberated state. Krishna is the only perfect person.
Well, there's a little more nuanced answer. Yes.
I'm going to argue that it's both. He's perfect in the sense that, like, he was created to perform certain function.
Yeah.
but the performance of the function wasn't possible at the point he started to Krishna. Krishna empowered it. So same goes for Prabhupada. Is he perfect? His bhakti is perfect. So in a sense, that's
Okay. So if Prabhupada's perfect, that means he knows everything. Yes.
Some conversations where Prabhupada himself made it clear that the spiritual master is not omniscient. He doesn't know everything. On spiritual topics, master's word as absolute, but we shouldn't be hanging on to every word that he might speak about other topics. And he doesn't intend us to, hyper focus on the absolutism of his other statements that might relate to material things. He just wants us to take his statements regarding bhakti as absolute. And in some of those conversations, Prabhupada says that spiritual master is perfect insofar as he repeats the words of his spiritual master about the science of bhakti. And Krishna allows him to speak perfectly on those matters.
So, well, how do we know then when Prabhupada is speaking ex cathedra, when he's not? You know the term ex cathedra? It's a term from Catholicism. When the Pope is speaking with the authority of the throne of St. Peter, it's called ex cathedra. That he's speaking by Catholics, that's accepted as that is the final word. At least some Catholics. When it we can use it similarly. How do we know when Prabhupada's speaking ex cathedra or when Prabhupada's not? How do we know when to accept what he's saying as factual and when not to? What a provocative question. Any ideas? Yeah.
I mean, generally, whenever Prabhupada speaks on philosophy or on spiritual matters, he often, even if he's not quoting the previous acharyas, he is generally speaking from what they have said. So for me, if general philosophy, spiritual matters, or even topics that are or like instructions that are based on connected with spiritual life, and might be more of a practical application. So those that's when it starts getting into more of a not a gray area necessarily, but area where there's more nuance when in applying things sometimes. Okay. But yeah.
That's all true. What's the one thing that would get Prabhupada really angry? One thing more than anything else. He might get angry because somebody put salt in the charitamrita instead of sugar and did something really stupid. One time a very important guest was coming to see Prabhupada in the early days, some very high official, and Prabhupada was taking a nap. So he came and Prabhupada's servant said, "Sorry, you can't see him, he's taking a nap." And when Prabhupada heard the guy came and left, he was so furious. "Why didn't you wake me? He had an appointment to see me." But Prabhupada's anger would dissipate in seconds. He would never hold on to anger. He expressed it because it was necessary for training us. But one thing, Prabhupada's anger didn't dissipate very easily. One thing. And when this would happen, the anger would last. Anybody know what it is? Yes. Changing words. Changing what's that? Words. No. Not that. Yes. One thing only.
some of his disciples might have started speaking philosophies that are a little bit contradictory to the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy.
A particular philosophy,
Mayavadi philosophy,
a particular aspect of Mayavadi.
that he was God.
Exactly the point. When anybody would say Prabhupada is God, he'd get really mad. I'm the servant of God. And then I saw that. He'd get very upset. And some of his early disciples decided he was really God. Because the early disciples coming from hippie background, hippies generally, we were impersonalists coming from that background. So some of his leading men in the 60s got together and decided he was really God. What did Prabhupada do with them? He did. They were all let back in. And some of them became very accomplished leaders later on. But he threw them all out on the spot. And Prabhupada didn't throw people out. He just didn't do it. And he threw them out because the one thing is, he's not God. So, to say that Prabhupada is omniscient is dangerous. Here's a quote from Prabhupada. There's a great paper on this by Hridayanath Maharaj called Understanding Prabhupada. It really is the best paper I've read on this topic. Here's a quote from Prabhupada. How can I give an opinion on medical science? That is ludicrous. I can give an opinion in my jurisdiction. That's all right. But if somebody asks my opinion about medical treatment or some legal implication, what can I do? And devotees would always be asking Prabhupada these things, and he'd answer the best he could. But he didn't accept these things. He didn't claim to be an expert in that subject matter, not an expert in everything. God knows everything because he is perfect. Prabhupada says, but I do not know. Although it is by my energy this body is produced, I do not know how these veins are created, how these bones are created. I do not know. Therefore, I am not God. I do not know. We accept Krishna as our guru. If he is perfect in knowledge, our knowledge is perfect. As far as we are concerned, we do not have to be perfect in ourselves, but we receive knowledge from the perfect. So Prabhupada explained this to me personally. I was not a devotee, but kind of bewildered by who do you trust? What do you know? So I asked Prabhupada directly. And Prabhupada, in a very humble state, just like Lord Brahma here, said something interesting. He said, I am like the mailman. If the mailman delivers a letter without opening it and changing it, just delivers a letter, he is a perfect mailman. He may have his own flaws, his own personal flaws, whatever he has. But if he delivers that letter exactly as it is, without adding or subtracting anything from it, without editing the letters, then he is the perfection of a mailman. So Prabhupada said, that is the perfection of being a guru. I'm delivering what I was taught. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that. The guru has to set an example, has to teach by example, not just words. I mean, there's other, the Upadeshamrita discusses this in some more detail. But the idea is the perfection is giving the message. So let me ask this question. Did Prabhupada ever have an opinion on something? Trick question. What do you say, Chris?
Say yes.
Tell me some more.
I just know because I read that.
You read it, so you know. Now, Prabhupada often would say, I have no opinion. And he said that many times. I never said anything which is not spoken by Krishna. I never said, in my opinion, what is the value of my opinion? I am an imperfect being, 1974. So Prabhupada stated, I have no opinion, meaning he is just giving the Krishna version. But, and this is the big but, Prabhupada also said many times, I do have an opinion. How do we distinguish that? First, he's saying, I have no opinion. Then he's saying, I have an opinion. I'm confused. Can somebody help me out with this? I don't want to bloop today due to an existential crisis. So can somebody, not Chris, because he knows the answer. What's the answer? Anybody? Prabhupada says, I have no opinion. But later on, he begins sentences, in my opinion. And in my opinion, he said there'll be a war between Russia and America. He said something like that. Yes.
Into like differences in spiritual and like non-spiritual matters, like when it was about spiritual matters, he just repeated what
Exactly correct.
Krishna said.
On spiritual matters, he only gave Krishna's opinion. He presented very well in his own words, in his own unique, wonderful way, and in his special way. But it was just repeating what was said in a way that was relevant and understandable by us. But when it came to certain material matters, he would, like all of us, have an opinion. Why is it important that Prabhupada had his own opinion? This is a very important question. It gets to the core of Krishna consciousness. Why is it important he had his own opinion? Yes.
He has an individuality, and because we're not impersonalists, so we all have our own individuality and tiny bit of free will.
See, that was a perfect answer. It was good. See, you're perfect. Okay, so, yeah, because we can't take away Prabhupada's individuality. We all have our desires, our likes and dislikes. Our goal is to purify our desires so they become connected to Krishna, but not to eliminate the desires. If Prabhupada never had an opinion, he wouldn't be a person. And we are, as Ram Baru says, she has this wonderful phrase. It should be I think, the tagline for the whole Krishna movement. And the phrase is, anybody know the phrase? Nobody's taken her course. Oh, she's brilliant. Okay, she has a phrase, I love it. It's called radical personalism. We are personalists. The biggest weakness we ever have in a movement is when we become impersonal. Start treating each other as objects, not persons. Nobody likes that. The whole Me Too movement began because women were being treated as objects, not persons. And people had enough of it. And so the idea here is that we can be our individual selves, we can have our particular desires. I'll give you an example of this. I asked Prabhupada this question. Devotees were telling me, I was just kind of a newbie observing, I'd even identify as a devotee. They were telling me anything offered to Krishna is prasadam, and you should honor it and eat it. Has anybody had trouble that what they were offered was so spicy they couldn't eat it? Who has had that trouble? So what do you do in that case? It's prasadam. You have to honor it, and so spicy is going to burn your gut out. So what's the solution to that? What do you think Prabhupada said? Any guess? Yes.
Can honor it with your eyes. So look at it.
Not what he said, but you could. That's a good answer. That's a good answer. Prabhupada said, you're not Lord Shiva who can drink poison, so don't imitate. Second thing he says, the cook should be sympathetic to who he's cooking for. Now let me ask you a trick question. How many chilies did Lord Chaitanya eat in his lifetime? Red chilies. How many? Why 0? Of course, there were no chilies in India. Not until the Portuguese and Spanish conquistadors came. So this idea that so-called Vedic food burns your guts out like anything, it's a concoction. People in warm climates tend to eat spicy food because it helps with digestion. That's a different matter. And I'm not saying you shouldn't eat chilies or should eat chilies. I'm saying if you can't tolerate chilies, you should not eat them. I can't tolerate chilies. So, okay, so we're at 8:30. I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Yes.
I have a question.
This is where things really get interesting. Is devotees will have different opinions on when Prabhupada said something, if it was a spiritual statement or not. I was with a senior devotee maybe 2 weeks ago or so, and they made a very radical statement about Krishna lunch, a little bit of an offensive statement. They said, Prabhupada said only ghee and peanut oil should be used for making prasadam. So what's being done at Krishna lunch, it's not even prasadam. Okay, so in that devotee's opinion, Prabhupada is making a statement about how to cook, and he thinks it relates to devotional service because that's what Prabhupada said, what should be done with prasadam, which is how we serve Krishna. So, there's these areas where devotees are going to differ on something Prabhupada might have said. Is it actually something relating to Bhakti Yoga? One person might think it is, and the other one might clearly think, no, it's clearly not.
Well, two comments. One, whoever said that is quite foolish. And I'll state that bluntly. The most dangerous thing for the movement, Krishna movement, is one simple statement. Prabhupada says, there's nothing more dangerous. Why? Because there's no philosophy, no context, nothing. And Prabhupada spoke in the years he was with us. He spoke on so many things according to time, place, and circumstance. So you can find Prabhupada saying this, or he could be saying that. That quote you gave on the ghee, that was talking about offerings to the deities, and I believe it was in India where these things are taken very seriously by the local people. Prabhupada also gave other instructions on prasadam other times. So one of the key missing points that devotee did not understand was the difference between the detail and principle of devotional service. The detail is, am I using ghee or coconut oil? One might be better than the other, but the principle is I'm offering offerable food to Krishna. That's the principle. If you offer me with love a flower, leaf, water, I'll accept it. That's the principle. The detail matters. I mean, in China, the prasadams can be very different than in Mexico. It's just generally, and Prabhupada said that, local people will eat local food. I'll give an example. Prabhupada was brought up in Bengal where mustard oil is used a lot. I can't digest mustard oil, so I don't eat food with mustard oil, but Prabhupada did. But as Prabhupada got older, he couldn't digest mustard oil. And his wonderful sister, Bhishma, she was just this very saintly lady, she would cook for her brother, and she would cook in mustard oil. And then Prabhupada had this dilemma. Well, my sister cooked, I better eat it, but I can't eat it. So he'd nibble a little bit to satisfy his sister. But he couldn't, at that point in his life, he could no longer tolerate mustard oil. So does that mean that it's a matter of not imitating? I'll tell one story. I won't mention the name because the devotee's still around, but very nice scholarly devotee. But in 1973, he went to India for 3 months. Then he came back to New York. And when he came back, I'm not exaggerating, with a heavy Bengali accent. He's American. Because that's how Prabhupada spoke, and that's how we ought to be speaking. This is a prime example of imitating, not following. So in a similar way, we have to be practical. When I was first in Mayapur, again, I wasn't a devotee, I had a little cold. And some devotees came up to me and one devotee gave me a 30-minute lecture on Ayurveda, how modern medicine is evil. I shouldn't be taking anything but Ayurvedic medicine. Then the next devotee walks up to me and says, gee, I heard you have some cold medicine. Can I have some? So we can see that's not a mature way to deal with things. Some devotees are very heavy. Oh, you can only take Ayurvedic medicine. One time, Harikesh Swami then was with Prabhupada in New Orleans, and I was there, and he had a bad cold. So I brought him the usual suspects: orange juice, vitamin C pills, zinc pills, the usual things you do when you have a cold. Then I saw him a month later in Denver. He was traveling with Prabhupada, and I went to Denver to see Prabhupada. I said, Harikesh, you look well now. Would I bring you help? He goes, no. He said, Prabhupada said, you have a Western body, just go to a doctor and take whatever shot they give you. I went to the doctor, he gave me a shot, and I was better the next day. He said, you have a Western body, do it. So the point of this, I'm not saying Ayurveda is good or bad, or Western medicine has its problems and its benefits. I'm not saying one is good or bad. What I'm saying is we do what's practical so we can keep a healthy body to engage in service. If we were to serve only ghee on the campus, we would be serving 100 plates a day instead of 1,000. I think economically, I think that would be correct. Do the math and see which one would please Prabhupada more. It's obvious. But devotees who are very, very concerned about details and not about principles, there's a Sanskrit word for them. What is it? Very concerned about details, but not the big picture. Sanskrit word. Anybody know it? What's that? I don't hear you. Oh, yeah. Well, that word applies, but it's simpler. Kanishta. Kanishta means a devotee who's very concerned about the details, but doesn't get the big picture. And all of us begin as kanishtas, by the way. When we're new devotees, I was very concerned. One devotee told me, well, if you cut your fingernails the wrong time of day, a ghost will haunt you or something. I mean, actually, somebody said that to me. Okay. I actually believed it for a while. So these things happen. I'll give one example, and then Prashad was coming in to put this in context. Why? Okay. On the typewriter keyboard, what letter do you hit with your right hand? Most people are right-handed. Your strongest finger. What letter on the keyboard? You all know this. What letter on the keyboard you hit with your weakest finger? Your pinky on your left hand. Most people are right-handed. What letter? You got the keyboard. Well, go cheat. We like cheating. J. How often do you type J? How often do you type A? Does that seem stupid? Why is that? There has to be a reason. Why would a keyboard be made the least efficient way possible? Anybody guess? Yeah, Chris.
If you type too fast on a mechanical keyboard, it'll jam up.
Exactly. To prevent the keys from jamming, before there were electronic keyboards, it was manual that levers moving the keys. If you type too fast, the keys would jam. So they intentionally made a keyboard to slow us down from typing, which is the same keyboard we have now, but it makes no sense anymore. Rituals. We all have some rituals that make no sense, but we don't know the origin of it. So this is a good lesson. Let's look at the principles, not the details. Don't get too hung up on it. There was this final story, this one sadhu went to bathe in the holy Ghat. And when he got there, he took his shoes off and put it on the steps, as everyone would do. And he realized that all the shoes looked alike. So he rolled up a mud ball and put it in his shoe. That way, when he got out of the river after taking the holy bath, he could recognize his shoes. So people saw, look what the sadhu did. He put a mud ball in his shoe. So everyone put mud balls in their shoes. So we try to avoid that. With that, we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.